Good morning, I'm Abigail Jagger.
I'm Joe Yobi.
I'm Joe Schmurrow.
And I'm Bo Taylor.
And this is our field day number 6. Alright, so a little bit of background information. We decided to do our field day on compliance. And so there are 3 different techniques for compliance. The first one is the foot in the door technique. And what this is it's trying to get someone to say yes to a small situation. So an example of this would be if you're walking through the mall and you're passing a vendor and one of the people asks you like, hey, may I have a moment of your time? If you say yes, you're committing to them and it makes you feel a little obligated to sit there and either listen to what they have to say or in the end possibly even buy what they're trying to sell you. So we have a video clip that shows you a little bit more about it.
Have you ever been to the mall or a shopping center and you see those carts with the very aggressive salespeople? As you walk by, they'll scream, "Excuse me, sir," or "Ma'am, could I ask you a question?" Now, you're generally the kind of person who allows other people to ask them a question, so you say, "Sure." And they'll ask you something like, "How do you think you would look in hair extensions?" Or, "Have you ever thought about buying a timeshare?" And they've got you. This is known as the foot in the door technique, and it works extremely well. Basically, the way it works is somebody will ask you for a small favor or a small request, and then subsequently ask you for a larger favor or a larger request. And if you agree to the first smaller request or favor, you will be more likely to comply with their larger request later on.
Okay, so another example of compliance method is the door in the face method. And what this method is when you start out asking for a large amount and then slowly acting like you're making sacrifices in order to get to the amount that you actually wanted. So an example of this would be if you wanted to go to the movies with your friends. The actual cost for tickets would be like $10, but you start out by asking your parents for $20 because, I don't know, maybe they will give it to you. But they say no, and so you go down to $15 and they still aren't really into it. But then you say $10 and they seem to feel like they're really getting a good deal for it considering you started with $20. So you go ahead and get the $10, which is the amount that you needed to begin with. And so again, here's a short clip explaining this a little further.
Hi guys, my name is Junko and my experiment investigated the door in the face technique. Now let me explain the technique to you. In this technique, a large request that the asker is certain that this request will be turned down is asked first. Here's an example. Just when the asker is turned down, the asker will follow up the request with a smaller request so that people are more likely to respond to. Many people will then comply to the request because principles like authority, commitment, liking, reciprocity, scarcity, and social proof influence them to comply to the request. Now let me explain the procedures of my experiment.
Alright, and so there's one more technique, and that's the "that's not all" technique. And this is from like all the infomercials you've ever seen, where we start out with giving you the price for the product that you're looking for. And then they'll say, well, that's not all. And they'll act like they're giving you a whole bunch of more stuff for free, when in reality you're still paying the exact same price you would even if you're buying the product separately. So, going into our field day explanation, we decided to test compliance. And so our general story was that our grandmother is very ill and we need money in order to get home for gas. And so we asked 2 faculty members and 2 students, and the reason why we did this was because we wanted to see what the difference between an older age generation and how they would respond to the question and people of our own generation and how they would respond. So our goal is to get as much money as possible, and this is how it went.
Well, our hypothesis was that we thought the faculty and staff would be more willing to give their own money to us because your parents have always taught you if you're in an emergency, find an adult. So we thought maybe the adults would help us out, give us more money to get gas so we can go home. And we thought that the students wouldn't give us much money because they're also struggling with money, they're students, but they understand the situation, they just can't give it to us because they also don't have money.
So we started out by asking different students. I asked the first student that we did, obviously I used the foot in the door technique, and I talked to the student in the cafeteria. I went up to him and asked him, I explained the situation about how my grandmother was ill, and I needed gas money to get back home, and I lived in Columbus, so it was a ways away, which is why I needed so much. I started out by asking for $50, and he very sympathetically said, "I'm sorry, I really can't, I don't have any money." After he said that, I brought the offer down to $20 just to see if, he really actually did have some money. But again, he said he feels terrible and he would give me the money in a heartbeat, but he doesn't have any money actually.
I interviewed student number 2, and I did door in the face, and so we went to B&B to change it up a little bit. Maybe they'd have cash. So I saw this guy sitting on a chair watching ESPN eating his fries, and so I go up to him and I just sat down next to him. He seemed very awkward, so I'm just like, I explained the story, almost cried, was very sad, and he's like he really wouldn't a heartbeat. I asked for $50, and he said he's struggling for money too, and he wanted to find a job because he really didn't have any money. So I'm like, okay, maybe he's bluffing. So I dropped it down to $20. And he said, "I'm really sorry, I really don't have any money." And so I'm like, okay, $5 just for gas. And he said, "I really don't have any money." So he seemed like he wanted to help like instantly, but he really didn't have any money. So then he asked if I was on the sports team, and I said, "Yeah, baseball." And so he said he found another way to help me, and he said I could go see my coach for money. So I thought that was nice of him.
Moving on to the faculty, as I said before, we thought this would be a little more successful, but the results were kind of the same. Again, we used the foot in the door technique. I talked to one of the ladies that was working in the bookstore. I went up to her, again, explained the situation, how my grandma was ill. I'm from Columbus, which is a faraway drive, and I needed about $50 for gas money. And she very, very not excitedly, but she was very energetic and frantic to try and help me find some help. And she said, "Oh, well, I can't give you money, but I think you can talk to Dean Fraser or someone in admissions and they can give you an emergency loan," or something along those lines. So while she wasn't going to give me her own money, she very quickly found a way for me to get the money. And as she was about to run out the door, I had to explain to her that it was just an experiment.
And I did faculty number 2, and we were in the cafeteria, and these 2 ladies were eating by themselves in the back. So I walk up to them, and I used door in the face, and actually and I would go up to them, and I asked for them another time, and I sat down, and I was very nervous and sad, and I asked them if I could have money, and not rude, but right off the bat, they're like, "You need to go see Dean Fraser for that." They didn't even say that they didn't have money or wanted to help. They're just like, "You should definitely go see Dean Fraser. He can help you directly." I think they thought I was kidding because they just were not willing to help at all. So I just thought that was interesting that they just said, "Go ahead and go see Dean Fraser for that." Maybe they thought I was buying beer or something, but I don't know. But it didn't work.
And for our conclusion, we found that the students seemed more willing to give their own money and more sympathetic to our situation, but the fact that they didn't have money, they couldn't give their own money. Where the faculty understood the situation, they felt bad for us, but weren't willing to give their own, but they also showed us a way to get money from someone else. So we've kind of found that to be a little rude and kind of ungenerous. The fact that they would tell us to go somewhere else to get money rather than offer their own. But to revisit our hypothesis, we said the faculty would be more willing to give us money, when in the opposite, it was the students more willing, they just couldn't because they didn't have money themselves. Thank you.